I was worried about talking about Rebirth because from the few people I have talked to about this series, this is where they told me that it really becomes a Junji Ito story. The constant upscaling passes creepy and becomes supernaturally scary, to use their words. Which, if you're at all familiar with my history with his work, is a big red flag for me. Usually the big supernatural stinger at the end of a Junji Ito story, perfection. But when it's near the beginning or the middle, it starts a climb of absurdity that I usually can't follow. All of this being said, all of the films so far have been surprisingly good when focused on Tomie and her victims and hunters, so I'm remaining optimistic. Super quick summary, because we're 4 films deep at this point. Tomie is an anthology collection about a supernatural girl whose beauty and need to use the men around her usually lead to her being violently killed by jealous and possessive men. She then returns from the dead to seek vengeance on them, and also to continue her life and the cycle. Tomie has several gifts beyond just resurrection. The primary one being that she seems to regenerate from separate parts, meaning that multiple Tomie can exist at the same time, and they can and will come across each other. In Another Face, this was shown as amicable, where they work together to kill a photographer, but in Replay, they were antagonistic, with Tomie mocking and even killing another one of her forms. So we'll see how Rebirth handles this, if it does come up here. All that out of the way, let's get into it. Rebirth actually begins with Tomie already in a relationship, as she sits posing for a portrait until deciding to get up and inform the artist that she does like him, before wandering over to examine a display of awards he's received. When she finds photos of another girl that he's taking in a distance though, her petty side takes over and she silently walks over and uses a blade to carve the portrait of her that he had been painting. He reacts, as we all would, by violently murdering her, and we have our title. The artist, named Hideo, then calls 2 of his friends to help dispose of her body in the woods, which they actually do help him with. One of his friends, Takumi, returns home to a suspicious girlfriend who is right to be suspicious because he's apparently cheated on her before. He gets upset when she notices dirt on his face and eventually blood on his clothes. Back at Hideo's, he's cleaning the blood up when he seems to become enthralled with some of it that's blended with the paint on his palette and has begun pulsing. He grabs handfuls of it and happily smears it on her portrait before we cut back to Takumi sleeping. He's having nightmares about burying Tomie, including seeing that she opened her eyes and watched them do it, until he's awoken by a call from a friend inviting them to a party. All 3 of them go to attend but are unable to get into the party, made even worse when the power goes out. Takumi and the other friend go to get intended to do something, but when the power returns in the room, Hideo is shocked to find that Tomie has joined them. She's immediately swarmed with suitors hitting on her, but Hideo lashes out at them, proclaiming that Tomie is his while she enjoys the attention. Tomie seems pretty nonplussed by this whole thing, while Hideo seems pleased with himself, but Tomie then asks when exactly she became his, before calling him a murderer. As Takumi and the other friend return to the party, Tomie sits completely unconcerned as all of the guys have begun physically fighting over her, before turning an angry glare at the others who help bury her. Takumi and company go to find Hideo in the bathroom for answers as to what's going on, but instead find that he's performed self-surgery, making this one of the quickest turnarounds between killer and victim that I think we've seen in this entire series. The next day, Takumi, his sister Rie, comes to stay with him and is just kind of a pain in the ass until we jump to the friends walking home after Hideo's funeral. And after some general lamentations about Hideo's home life, they begin to broach the topic of Tomie, as the friend wants to go see if her body is still there, but Takumi disagrees. If you're wondering why I haven't used the other friend's name, they haven't said it yet, or shown it in any way, and I'm kind of curious as to how far we can get into this movie before they do. The friend heads out on his own to dig up Tomie, and while he eventually finds the sheets they covered her in, her body is long gone, or so it seems. Then she appears directly behind him, telling him that he's looking for her. So here she is. Takumi does eventually make his way to the scene as Tomie laments how much he dislikes being buried, as it's rather disgusting to eat bugs and dirt, till eventually the friend snaps and beats her to death with the shovel. We then follow Takumi to a bar where he's seemingly trying to drink away what just happened with his girlfriend, when Tomie joins him and asks why he didn't try to help her earlier. His girlfriend grows increasingly uncomfortable with Tomie and her seeming closeness with Takumi, even remembering her lipstick as the red mark on his clothes earlier. Takumi's girlfriend, Hitomi, confronts her and Tomie responds by telling her how he watched her get attacked earlier and just left, which she seems to take as insane ramblings. She pulls Takumi away before warning Tomie not to come near them, which Tomie declares is probably not going to happen, And here, 28 minutes into the movie, we learn the other friend's name is Shun, as his mother informs him that he has a female visitor. This visitor, despite all expectations, is Tomie. She happily declares to Shun that she's back, until we jump to Takumi meeting with one of the girls from the party who tells him that he's the fourth guy to ask about her since the party. But all she knows is the name Tomie. Weirdly unrelated to that revelation and conversation, Takumi just goes to visit Hideo's home and finds his mother seemingly despondent in grief. She asks if Hideo had a girlfriend before showing Takumi the collection of photos of Hitomi, but he denies it. Takumi then seems to have a vision of the night Hideo was killed, both before the murder and their discovery of him with the body, before snapping back to reality. He uncovers the portrait of Tomie as Hideo's mother informs him that Hideo came to her in a dream and said that she must give it to Takumi. It's actually pretty cool, if I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't want it in my house because I'd probably see it one night going to pee and die, but it's really good artwork that shows the dichotomy of Tomie. Shun, meanwhile, seems to have been roped into going shopping with Tomie as he wanders a busy crosswalk calling her name. It seems that he's fallen under her thrall, but upon returning home, Tomie is confronted by Shun's mother, and responds by very unsubtly calling her old and accusing her of lying about Shun's father being dead instead of having left her. She then frames the mother by burning her own hand on the mom's cigarette, but when Shun arrives, it looks like the mom was just trying to burn her. The mom then makes them all coffee, but spikes Tomie's cup with, I'm not sure, alcohol? Soy sauce? It's a big kitchen-looking bottle, but way darker than alcohol that I've ever seen, so I don't know. It ends up not mattering anyway, because Tomie claims to not like coffee, and then calls Shun's mom, which clearly upsets her. And when the mom refuses to drink the coffee, Tomie chugs the entire cup. Back at Takumi's, Rie discovers the painting while Takumi and Hitomi discuss Hideo, and he shows her the collection of photos, which she takes umbrage with, claiming that she just wants to know what's going on with Tomie. She throws all the evidence at him: the mark on his clothes, the painting, accusing him the night he was out that he was with her, which leads to him striking her, and she leaves. To make matters worse, the next morning she finds a tube of lipstick in his jacket that he had taken from Hideo's. Rie continues to be an annoyance before goading Hitomi about being cheated on, and then tries to use it as leverage to get Hitomi to take her out on the town. Takumi goes to visit Shun, but is turned away by his mother, telling him that he doesn't come out of his room much anymore. She nervously asks if he knows about Tomie, but quickly backs off and closes the door. Hitomi, meanwhile, growing increasingly jealous of Tomie, puts on her lipstick before quickly wiping it off. Takumi drops Rie off at the station and returns home to find Hitomi distant and cold. At Shun's house, he's been deep cleaning the entire place because Tomie doesn't like the smell of things that his mom has touched. And when his mom tries to plead with him, he pushes her away, telling him that if she touches him, he won't be able to get close to Tomie again. And his mom looks on in horror. Takumi finds Hitomi staring blankly at nothing, seemingly entranced. And when he snaps her out of it, she seems to know what was happening at Shun's, but shrugs it off as a dream. That night at Shun's, his mother strangles Tomie in her bed, but Tomie seems to be happy about it, causing his mother to freak out and question why she's laughing as she's being strangled. Shun awakens to find his mother about to cut her body apart, and instead of being upset that Tomie is dead, he helps his mother dispose of her. It's here, about an hour in, that I begin to wonder how much more we can do with this premise, but things get really uncomfortable as Shun and his mother bond over the act of disposing, even comparing it to crafts that they used to do when he was a kid. Hitomi, meanwhile, is struck with visions from Tomie's severed head, watching them cut apart her body. And Takumi notices that she's developed a mole underneath her eye, just like Tomie's. Shun and his mother walk with bags full of Tomie, planning on how they're going to go to a hot spring later, and even that they should celebrate tonight. But when Shun's mother claims to hear something, and Shun sees one of the bags move, he panics and leads her away before they're followed by Tomie's severed head and hands. Shun seemingly still seems to love Tomie, despite her being a dismembered head and hands, but his mother ain't having it. When the head starts talking shit, like to her face, she takes it to an incinerator and burns it, as Tomie calmly responds with the simple, "See you again soon." We join Takumi and Shun seemingly a bit after that incident, with Shun commenting how his mother's been bedridden with a weird disease, and Takumi says that Tomie has been dreaming constantly about when they buried Tomie in the woods, even though she wasn't there and shouldn't know about it. They both go to see her, and Shun declares that it's pretty obvious what's happening, and that Hitomi isn't herself anymore. He explains that Tomie never dies. she revives and multiplies, and is overwhelmed with excitement at getting to see her again, before quickly growing jealous and accusatory that Takumi also wants Tomie back, which does seem to upset Takumi, but not in the way that it should. Shun leaves and Takumi tries to confirm that Hitomi is really her, but she is both unable to remember things about the relationship and seemingly fades in and out of reality. Takumi realizes that it was the lipstick that did this to her and destroys it. Shun, meanwhile, is weirdly affectionate with what I'm hoping is a lock of hair he kept and not just his mother's hair that he assumes is Tomie's. As Takumi and Hitomi try to figure out their option, Shun calls to let them know that his mother has passed away. At her funeral, Takumi opens a casket and finds her body covered in hair, growing literally everywhere, including out of her mouth. Shun closes it and tells him not to worry about it, that her heart is stopped and it's over. Takumi returns home the next day to find Shun making out with Hitomi and kicks him out of the house, but Hitomie merely taunts him until he brings her back and she collapses. Afterwards, they talk about what happened, and Hitomi says that while she was out, she dreamt of a room with a dog barking outside and a bite. Shun is outside just losing his fucking mind, throwing rocks into the windows, and when Takumi and Hitomi drive off to find the painting, he throws a tantrum in the middle of the street. We join Rie at Takumi's old rural family home where she's called horny and then has her ass slapped by her dad? Yeah. This is a scene that I bring up solely because I had to know it exists because I watched this movie, so now you do too. Anyway, Tomie is reborn out of the painting Hideo made, like the worst adaptation of Dorian Gray, as Takumi and Hitomi pull up to the house, and Takumi finds the painting, but without Tomie in it. She confronts Takumi and tries to turn everything he did to protect Hitomi into acts of saving Tomie. But Takumi continues to say that he loves Hitomi. Tomie, much like me after 4 films, is really tired of explaining who she is and her whole shtick, even describing it as boring. She continues to attempt to seduce Takumi, driving him to flee to Hitomi, who Tomie just explains is just a failed copy of her. She reminds Hitomi of how Takumi and Shun buried her in the woods, which seems to reactivate Hitomi, and she takes immediate umbrage with having been called a failure. They then both immediately begin asking Takumi to kill the other, as Takumi throws gasoline at them both, but mostly gets Tomie, and under Hitomie's order sets her ablaze. Shun then comes out of fucking nowhere, I guess having run this entire time, and immediately chucks himself into the inferno like the world's stupidest golem, even though there's another Hitomie standing right there. Takumi still isn't having it though. He drags Hitomi through the woods and up a waterfall behind his house that Hitomi had wanted to see. He manages to bring Hitomi back by wanting to jump off with her, and while she tries to push him away to save him, he refuses. Tomie then forms her head out of Hitomi's body, and with a final declaration of love, they leap over the edge. Rie then arrives a few days later to pay respects to them, tossing flowers into the lake where, after floating for a short time, they're pulled under by a hand. The camera then shows that Rie also has a mark under her eye, and the curse of Tomie lives on. Oh boy, I don't know where to start with this one. I guess in a way I was right to be wary, but not for the reason that I thought. Although this was the beginning of the Tomie possession arc that will probably continue for the duration of this series as it did the manga, we didn't enter the real weird part of Tomie by any means. If anything, my biggest complaint about this one is that it's kinda slow. The first 20 minutes are pretty good. Tomie dies twice, gets vengeance on the artist, and starts a fist fight. It's great. But then we slam on the brakes and don't really get started again for another 40-ish minutes. I get that people are probably interested in the tension of Tomie ruining people's lives, but even in this situation, I couldn't get into it. I will say that once we get back, pretty much from the strangling onward, it's pretty good. The weird bonding of Shun and his mom is honestly pretty off-putting in a good way, and the very short interactions that Hitomi and Tomie have, both at the bar and at the barn at the end, are really good, and I wish there were more of them. All in all, Rebirth isn't bad per se, but to quote Tomie herself, it's not very interesting. You know what will be interesting? Tomie Forbidden Fruit, because that one, ooh boy, that one has some topics. I'm not going to spoil anything for those who don't know, but the title is like a triple entendre. I'll see you then. I love you all. Good night. I think I'm good.